My name was Brother Captain Theron Ashmark of the Flame Falcons chapter, and I have been burning alive for 743 years. The flames consume me in an eternal present tense. My flesh chars and blackens, cracks and splits, exposing bone that glows white-hot like metal in a forge. The pain is absolute. Every nerve ending screaming in frequencies that transcend sound, every cell dying and regenerating and dying again in an endless cycle. My bones are furnaces, my blood is promethium. My screams echo through a ship that exists in no fixed point in space or time, a vessel caught between one heartbeat and the next, trapped in the moment of our damnation. We still fight. That's the horror of it. The ship's corridors are filled with my battle brothers, 372 space marines of the Flame Falcons, the cursed founding's most tragic failure. We patrol empty halls with weapons raised, our armor fused to burning skeletons, our flesh long since consumed but somehow still present, reforming and burning away in perpetual agony. We defend a ship that has no enemies aboard. We serve an imperium we can never return to. We chant the liturgies of battle, even as our mouths fill with fire. The Emperor protects. We scream through throats lined with embers. But he doesn't. He never did. That was the first lie they told us, and the last truth we learned. But let me tell you how we got here. Let me tell you about the chapter that was born, cursed, declared heretic for our suffering, and condemned to burn forever in the space between spaces. Let me tell you about faith betrayed, loyalty repaid with damnation, and the moment we understood that the God Emperor we served was neither God nor protector, just a name painted over our own extinction. Let me tell you about the day the Flame Falcons entered the warp and never came out. My name was Theron Ashmark, and I was 117 Terran Standard years old when they told us we were cursed. I remember my induction into the Flame Falcons like I remember my own birth, which is to say, with perfect clarity, because Astarte's memory is designed to be eidetic. I was selected at age 11 from the feral world of Boreas Quintus, a child whose only crime was being born with the genetic markers that made me compatible with space marine augmentation. They took 17 of us that year. Only I survived the transformation. The apothecaries assured me this was normal, that the Flame Falcons had an unusually high rejection rate during implantation. 63% of aspirants died during the process, their bodies unable to accept the gene seed. This was explained as the necessary cost of creating the Emperor's angels, as if our brothers' screams during failed surgeries were prayers being answered rather than children dying in agony. I believed them. We all did. The Flame Falcons were born from the 21st founding, the so-called cursed founding. An attempt by the Mechanicus to improve upon the Emperor's original Space Marine template. They claimed they could refine the gene seed, enhance the augmentations, create superior warriors. The Adeptus Mechanicus propaganda stated this was innovation in service to the Imperium, blessed work that honored the Emperor's vision. They lied. Every chapter born from the 21st founding was flawed. The Lamenters suffered catastrophic bad fortune. The Black Dragons grew bone blade mutations. The Minotaurs became savage and uncontrollable. And we, the Flame Falcons, we burned, not metaphorically. Not in the sense of passionate warriors or zealous fighters. We literally burst into flames. I first ignited during battle on the world of Cressida 7, 93 years after my transformation into an Astartes. We were fighting an orc war that had overrun the planet's northern continent. Standard engagement, shock assault, followed by sustained bolter fire to break the greenskin line. I was a tactical marine then, part of 3rd Squad. Nothing special. Just another space marine doing what we were created to do. Kill in the Emperor's name. The orc mob crashed into our position like a green tide, roaring their brutal war cries. I fired controlled bursts from my bolter, each round punching through orc flesh with satisfying precision. My training was flawless. My aim was perfect. My faith was absolute. Then something inside me ignited. It started as warmth in my chest, spreading outward like water soaking into fabric. Not painful, not yet. Almost pleasant, like standing near a fire on a cold night. I thought perhaps my armor's environmental systems were malfunctioning, that the suit was overheating from sustained combat. Then I looked down and saw flames rippling across my armor's surface. Not burning the armor, not consuming it, just flowing over it, orange and gold tongues of fire that seemed to emerge from within me, passing through the ceramite as if it were air. My hands were wreathed in flame. My bolter's barrel glowed red hot, the metal conducting heat that originated from my grip. "Brother Theron," my squad sergeant shouted over the vox. You're burning." I was. But the strangest thing, it didn't hurt. The fire felt right, like an extension of my body discovering its true nature. I continued fighting, and where I had been competent before, now I was devastating. Orcs caught fire when I struck them. My bolter rounds ignited on impact, turning each kill into an explosion of burning flesh. I became a weapon of immolation, and it was glorious. The flames extinguished after the battle ended. I stood among the orc corpses, my armor scorched but intact, my skin unmarked beneath. The apothecaries examined me for hours, running every test they possessed. A mutation, they declared, but potentially useful. We must observe. Over the next decade, 17 other battle brothers manifested the same ability. We could ignite at will during combat, wreathing ourselves in fire that harmed our enemies, but left us untouched. The chapter masters debated what this meant. Some called it a blessing, a sign that the Emperor had granted us a unique gift to better serve the Imperium. Others called it a mutation that must be monitored carefully. We who burned called it the gift. We were wrong. It wasn't a gift. It was evidence of our fundamental flaw, the proof that we were mistakes written into flesh by Mechanicus arrogance. Before I was Brother Captain Theron Ashmark, before I was a space marine, before I was anything the Imperium could use, I was just Theron, son of a hunter named Kale. Boreas Quintus was a death world, cold and hostile, where survival was measured in how many winters you could endure. My father taught me to track prey through snow that could bury a man in minutes, to build shelter from wind that cut like knives, to find food in a landscape designed to kill. I remember one hunt in particular when I was 9 years old. We had tracked a great ice bear for 3 days through a blizzard. The beast was massive, 3 meters tall, fur white as fresh snow, claws like black iron. My father could have killed it from range with his crossbow, but he insisted we get close. "Why?" I asked, shivering despite my furs, my child's body struggling against the cold. "Because killing from far away teaches you nothing about respect," my father said, his breath steaming in the frigid air. His hands, I remember his hands so clearly, were scarred from a lifetime of hunting, rough and strong. When you kill something, you should look it in the eye. You should understand what you're taking from the world. Distance makes death easy. Easy deaths make men careless. We got close. The ice bear reared up when it saw us, roaring its challenge. My father stepped forward with his hunting spear, and for 30 seconds that felt like hours, they fought. The bear's claws tore his shoulder open. His spear found its heart. The bear died. My father survived. He knelt in the snow afterward, placing his hand on the beast's head. "Thank you for your strength," he whispered to the corpse. "Your death feeds my son. That matters." When the Space Marine Scouts came 2 years later and selected me for tithe, my father didn't argue. The Imperium demanded children, and who was he to refuse? But before they took me, he gripped my shoulders with those scarred hands and said, "Remember what I taught you about distance and death. Whatever they make you into, whatever weapons they give you, don't forget that killing should mean something." I forgot. They trained us to kill from range, to reduce enemies to numbers, to measure success in body counts rather than individual lives. They taught us that the Emperor's enemies weren't people, but threats to be eliminated. Distance made death easy. Easy deaths made us efficient. I became exactly what my father warned me not to be, a killer who had forgotten what killing costs. By the time I remembered his words, I was already burning. The Inquisition came for us in the 119th year of my service. By then, 47 of my battle brothers manifested the gift. We had fought in 12 major campaigns, shed blood on 26 worlds, earned 17 commendations for valor. Our record was exemplary. Our loyalty was unquestionable. Our faith, or what we had been conditioned to call faith, was absolute. None of it mattered. Inquisitor Karamazov arrived with a fleet of black ships and a declaration sealed with the High Lord's authority. We were ordered to assemble in full chapter strength in the Fortress Monastery's Great Hall. 372 Space Marines, our entire fighting force, stood at attention while Karamazov read our sentence. By order of the Holy Inquisition and with the blessing of the High Lords of Terror, his voice echoed through the hall, amplified by vox casters. The Flame Falcon's chapter is hereby declared excommunicate traitoris. Your gene seed is corrupted. Your bodies are tainted. Your existence is an affront to the Emperor's vision of humanity's perfection. The words struck like bolt rounds. Excommunicate traitoris. Traitor. Heretic. We have served loyally for a century. Our chapter master, Brother Pyrrhus, shouted, "We have never wavered, never faltered. Our record proves our loyalty." "Your record proves nothing," Karamazov replied coldly. His face, I can still see it with perfect clarity, showed no sympathy, no doubt, no recognition of our humanity. Mutation is mutation, regardless of intent. The Emperor's angels must be pure. You are not pure. Therefore, you are not his angels. You are mistakes that must be corrected. Corrected. Brother Pyrrhus's voice carried the edge of barely controlled rage. What does that mean? "You will be taken to Terra for examination," Karamazov said. "There, the Adeptus Biologis will study your condition. Perhaps your flaw can be identified and prevented in future gene seed lines. Your sacrifice will serve the Imperium, even if your service cannot." Sacrifice. The word they use when they mean disposal. We could have fought 372 Space Marines against Karamazov's forces. We could have killed them all, seized their ships, fled into the void. We could have rejected the Imperium that rejected us, chosen freedom over loyalty to a regime that called us traitors for suffering from flaws we didn't choose. But we didn't, because we had been conditioned to obey. Because we believed, truly believed, that the Emperor's will was paramount, even when that will demanded our destruction. Because the programming ran deeper than conscious thought, and the idea of refusing orders from the Inquisition was literally incomprehensible to minds shaped by decades of indoctrination. "We will submit," Brother Pyrrhus said, and those words sealed our fate. "But know this, Inquisitor, we die loyal. When the Emperor judges us, he will find his servants obedient to the last." Karamazov's expression didn't change. "The Emperor," he said, with the casual certainty of a man who has never questioned the lies he's been told, "protects the faithful. If you are truly loyal, you have nothing to fear." We believed him. That was our greatest mistake. They loaded us onto the black ships like cargo, not like honored space marines being transported to Terra, like cattle being moved to slaughter. They stripped us of our weapons, our armor, our chapter heraldry, everything that identified us as Astartes. We were given prison garb, plain gray fabric that hung loosely on our augmented frames. The black ships, those vessels the Imperium uses to transport psychers to Terra, smelled like fear and despair. The corridors reeked of stale recycled air, chemical suppressants, and the particular odor of unwashed bodies held in close confinement. The walls were bare metal, cold to the touch, marked with scratches where previous prisoners had tried to claw their way out. We were confined to holding cells, 10 battle brothers per cell, standing room only, no beds, no furniture. Just metal walls and a single waste disposal chute. They fed us nutrient paste through slots in the door twice a day, flavorless gray sludge that tasted like ashes and provided exactly enough calories to prevent starvation. "This is how they honor our service," Brother Dante said bitterly on the third day. He was young for an Astartes, only 72 years in service, and the betrayal had broken something in him. A century of loyalty rewarded with prison cells and paste. "We must have faith," Brother Pyrrhus insisted. He stood in the cell's center, his massive frame somehow maintaining dignity despite the circumstances. "The Emperor's plan is beyond our understanding. Perhaps this trial serves some greater purpose." I said nothing. I was already beginning to doubt, though I lacked the framework to articulate that doubt. The conditioning ran too deep, the indoctrination too complete. When you're taught from childhood that questioning authority is heresy, developing critical thought becomes nearly impossible. We spent 17 days in those cells before the ship entered the warp. Standard procedure, the gods told us, was to take the most direct route to Terra. The journey should take approximately 32 days through the Immaterium, emerging in the Sol system where we would be transferred to holding facilities beneath the Imperial Palace. The transition into the warp was viscerally wrong. Space Marines are conditioned to withstand almost any physical sensation, but the warp affects the mind differently. When the Geller field activated and the ship translated into the Immaterium, I felt reality bend. Time became negotiable. The walls seemed to breathe. Sounds came from impossible directions, and the whispers began. They started as nothing, background noise, easily dismissed as air circulation or distant machinery. But over hours, they resolved into something else, voices speaking in languages I shouldn't understand, yet their meaning was perfectly clear. They spoke of pain and betrayal, of faith rewarded with damnation, of an emperor who devoured his own children and called it duty. "Do you hear them?" Brother Dante whispered on the second day in the warp. "Ignore them," Brother Pyrrhus commanded. "They are warp entities trying to corrupt us. The Emperor's teachings warned of this. Do not listen. Do not engage. Maintain your faith." But the voices were insidious. They didn't offer power or corruption the way the chaos entities supposedly did. They offered truth. They asked questions we had never been permitted to ask. Why does he demand your death for flaws you didn't choose? Why does he call you traitors for mutations his servants created? Why does loyalty always flow upward but never return? If he protects the faithful, why are you in chains? I tried not to listen. I recited the litany of protection as I'd been trained. Meaningless words strung together to occupy the mind and prevent independent thought. But the questions lingered, seeds planted in soil, made fertile by betrayal. On the fourth day in the warp, the fires began. Brother Dante ignited first. We were standing in our cell, maintaining a meditation posture, as Brother Pyrrhus led us through the catechism of endurance. More conditioning, more programming, more empty words meant to override independent thought. The chanting was steady, a collective rhythm that should have been comforting. Then Brother Dante screamed. Flames erupted from his body, not the controlled fire of the gift we had manifested in battle, but something wild and agonizing. His flesh caught like promethium-soaked cloth, orange fire consuming him from within. He thrashed against the cell walls, clawing at his own burning skin, his enhanced physiology keeping him conscious and aware while he burned. "Make it stop!" he shrieked, his voice raw with agony. "Emperor, please make it stop." We tried to extinguish him. We beat at the flames with our hands, tried to smother them with our prison garb. Nothing worked. The fire wasn't consuming fuel. It was consuming him, but he didn't burn away. His flesh would char black, crack open, and then regenerate instantly, only to catch fire again. The burning continued for 17 minutes before it finally stopped. Brother Dante collapsed to the deck, his body unmarked except for the smell of burned meat that lingered in the recycled air. He was sobbing, a sound I had never heard an Astartes make, a broken keening that spoke of pain beyond endurance. "It's the stress," Brother Pyrrhus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The warp transition, the confinement, it triggered his mutation. It will pass." It didn't pass. Over the next 3 days, 23 more battle brothers ignited in their cells. Each burning lasted between 15 and 20 minutes. Each one left the victim conscious throughout, experiencing every second of immolation. The screams echoed through the ship's corridors, a chorus of agony that the guards ignored. I asked one of the guards why they didn't help us, why they didn't send medical staff or apothecaries. He looked at me through the cell door's viewing slot, his face completely blank. "The Inquisition's orders are clear," he said in the flat tone of someone reciting protocol. "You are to be delivered to Terra for study. Your condition during transport is irrelevant. You will arrive, living or dead, functional or damaged. Those are the parameters." We weren't people to them. We were cargo, specimens, data points. On day 7, I ignited. The sensation started as I remembered from battle, warmth in my chest, spreading outward. But where before it had been controlled, purposeful, now it was wild. The fire came from within, as if my skeleton was a furnace and my flesh was kindling. I could feel my skin splitting, my muscles cooking, my blood boiling. The pain was absolute. Space Marine pain tolerance is legendary. We are conditioned to ignore wounds that would kill normal humans, to fight through injuries that would incapacitate baseline soldiers. But this pain bypassed all that conditioning. It was cellular, molecular, a violation of existence at the most fundamental level. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound ripped out of me, raw and animal, nothing like the controlled battle cries we were trained to produce. I was reduced to pure suffering, my entire identity compressed into the single experience of burning alive. And through it all, I remained conscious. That was the true horror. My enhanced physiology wouldn't let me pass out, wouldn't grant me the mercy of unconsciousness. I had to experience every second, feel every nerve ending die and regenerate and die again, watch my flesh char and reform in an endless cycle. When it finally stopped, I lay on the cell floor, trembling. Brother Pyrrhus knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "Stay strong, brother," he said. "The Emperor tests us, but he does not abandon his faithful. We will endure this trial and emerge purified." I wanted to believe him. The conditioning demanded I believe him. But a small voice, perhaps the warp whispers, perhaps just my own suppressed doubt, asked, what kind of protector lets his faithful burn? The burnings came in waves, following a pattern we slowly recognized. Every 8 hours, approximately 25 battle brothers would ignite simultaneously. The fires lasted exactly 17 minutes, then 8 hours of respite before the next wave. The pattern was too precise to be random mutation, too regular to be spontaneous. Something was causing this. Either the warp itself acting on our flawed gene seed, or some deliberate mechanism we couldn't identify. By week 2, we had all burned at least once. Some had burned multiple times. By week 3, the burnings were continuous. As soon as one wave ended, another began. The screaming never stopped. Brother Pyrrhus tried to maintain order and faith. He led prayers between burning cycles, his voice hoarse from shouting liturgies over the sound of brothers screaming. He preached about trials and testing, about how suffering proved devotion, about how the Emperor's hardest lessons produced his finest warriors. But his words rang hollow in cells that stank of burned flesh and despair. "How long must we endure?" Brother Carmichael asked during a brief respite. He had burned 7 times in as many days, his voice raw from screaming. "When does the test end? When does he—" He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the heretical thought that maybe there was no end, no purpose, no divine plan. "As long as he demands," Brother Pyrrhus said, but there was something broken in his tone now. "We are his instruments. We do not question. We endure." I watched him as he spoke and realized he was repeating programming, not offering comfort or wisdom, but reciting conditioning. The words were prayers, yes, but prayers, as in repeated sounds, meant to prevent thought, not communion with something divine. The ecclesiarchy propaganda had prepared us well. They taught us that suffering was evidence of the Emperor's attention, that pain was a gift, that agony proved we mattered enough to test. They conditioned us to interpret torture as love and call it devotion. But here, burning in cells while guards ignored our screams, the programming began to crack. "What if he doesn't care?" Brother Dante said during week 3. He had burned 14 times, more than any of us. Something in his mind had fractured. What if we're just mistakes? Genetic failures that they're transporting to Terra to be destroyed? What if there is no test, no purpose, no plan? What if we're just burning because our bodies are defective and no one cares enough to help us? That is heresy, Brother Pyrrhus said, but there was no conviction in the accusation. Is it? Brother Dante laughed, a broken sound. Is questioning torture heresy? Is asking why we suffer blasphemy? They taught us the Emperor protects. So where is his protection? They taught us loyalty is rewarded. So why are we in chains? They taught us faith matters. So why doesn't he answer when we pray? He answers, Brother Pyrrhus insisted. In his way, in his time. He doesn't answer, I heard myself say. The words came before I could stop them, emerging from the place where doubt had been growing like infection. We're praying to someone who can't hear us, or doesn't care, or maybe never existed the way they claimed. The Emperor is a corpse on a throne, not a god. We've been praying to propaganda. The silence that followed was absolute. Brother Pyrrhus stared at me, his expression cycling through shock, anger, grief. You don't mean that, brother. The warp has corrupted your thoughts. You must... The warp didn't corrupt me, I said, and felt something fundamental break inside my conditioning. The Imperium did. They taught us to call slavery devotion and torture testing. They taught us to worship a man and call him a god. They taught us that our suffering mattered, that it meant something, that it served some grand plan. But it doesn't. We're just burning because we're broken, and no one cares because broken tools get discarded. Then what do we do? Brother Carmichael asked quietly. I had no answer, because even understanding the lie doesn't free you from the cage built around that lie. We were still on the black ships, still heading to Terra, still burning. Knowing the Emperor was propaganda and not protection didn't stop the fires. It just meant we burned while understanding how completely we'd been betrayed. On day 28, we discovered we weren't alone on the ships. The guards became careless as our condition deteriorated. They stopped maintaining full containment protocols, treating us like cargo that was already damaged beyond concern. During one guard rotation change, a cell door was left briefly unsecured. Brother Carmichael, driven by desperation and 23 burnings worth of agony, forced it open. We weren't trying to escape. Where would we go on a ship in the warp? We were simply exploring, trying to understand what was happening to us. Brother Carmichael, Brother Dante and I moved through the corridors while the rest maintained position to avoid alerting guards. 3 decks down, we found the other prisoners. They were psychers, the black ship's standard cargo. Hundreds of them crammed into holding cells even more restrictive than ours. Men whose only crime was being born with psychic gifts, collected from across the Imperium and transported to Terra, where most would be sacrificed to fuel the Astronomicon. The propaganda called it service. We could see it was execution with extra steps. One psyker pressed against the bars of his cell as we passed. He was young, perhaps 17 Terran standard, his face gaunt from poor rations and despair. "You're the burning ones," he said, his voice rough. "We hear you scream every 8 hours like clockwork." "You know what's happening to us?" I asked. "The warp is reacting to your mutation," he said. "I can sense it. Your gene seed is unstable, resonating with the immaterium. The longer you stay in warp transit, the worse it will get. By the time you reach Terra, you'll be..." He trailed off. We'll be what? Brother Dante demanded. The psyker's expression was pure pity. You'll be burning continuously. Forever. Your bodies will exist in a state of perpetual immolation, dying and regenerating simultaneously. Consciousness trapped in eternal agony. You're becoming warp-touched, but not in a way that transforms you into something new. You're just stuck, frozen in the moment of your death, unable to die, unable to stop burning. The words struck like physical blows. There must be a way to stop it, Brother Carmichael said. Death, the psyker replied simply. That's the only way out, but your space marine physiology won't let you die easily. You'd need catastrophic damage, or... He paused, considering. Or you'd need to escape the warp. In real space, the effect might stabilize. Might. But you're days from terror, and every hour in the warp makes it worse. Why didn't they warn us? I asked. The Inquisition, the ship's command. They must know. The psyker laughed bitterly. They don't care. You're already declared heretic. Whether you arrive burning or functional, you're going to the same place. Dissection tables where Mechanicus adepts will study your flaw. Your suffering during transport is irrelevant to them. We returned to our cells with this knowledge, and I realized we had never mattered. Not as warriors, not as loyal servants, not as individuals. We were genetic data that had failed quality control, being transported to Terra for analysis before disposal. The fact that we were conscious during this process was inconvenient, but not relevant to the Imperium's purposes. That night, or what we approximated as night in the timeless warp, Brother Pyrrhus finally broke. I devoted 137 years to the Emperor's service, he said, his voice hollow. I killed in his name. I bled for the Imperium. I believed every word they taught us about duty and loyalty and faith, and they're transporting us like defective equipment to be analyzed and destroyed. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to matter, he said. I want our suffering to mean something. He stopped, unable to articulate the need that was tearing him apart. We all wanted the same thing, for our lives to have purpose beyond being mistakes, for our loyalty to be rewarded, our faith to be recognized, our suffering to serve some greater plan. But there was no plan. There was no purpose. There was only us, burning in the dark, slowly realizing that everything we'd been taught to believe was a lie, designed to make us obedient. On day 32, we should have emerged from the warp near Terra. We didn't. The ship continued sailing through the immaterium, the journey extending past its scheduled endpoint. The guards became nervous. We could hear it in their voices over the Vox systems, sense it in the way they moved through corridors with weapons drawn. Navigation malfunction, we heard one guard say. The navigators are trying to correct course, but something's wrong with the warp route. How long until we reach Terra? Another asked. Unknown. Could be days. Could be weeks. The warp is unstable. The burnings intensified. By day 32, we were igniting every 4 hours instead of 8. The duration extended from 17 minutes to 30. The pain somehow became worse, as if the fires were burning hotter, deeper, reaching into parts of us that shouldn't be capable of burning. Brother Dante ignited and didn't stop burning. His body caught fire during a cycle and simply remained burning. Hours passed. The flames consumed him continuously, his flesh charring and regenerating in a loop that never resolved. He screamed until his throat shredded, then screamed silently, his mouth open in eternal agony, while fire poured from his eyes and nose and ears. We couldn't help him, couldn't stop it, could only watch as one of our brothers existed in perpetual immolation, a preview of what awaited all of us. This is our future, Brother Carmichael said, his voice flat with horror. This is what we're becoming. Brother Pyrrhus tried to pray. He attempted to recite the litanies of protection, the catechisms of faith, all the programming we'd been given to override thought with repetition. But the words died in his mouth. How do you pray to someone who doesn't answer? How do you ask protection from a corpse? How do you maintain faith in a system that grinds you into components and calls it duty? On day 34, the ship lurched, reality twisted, the walls screamed. I know how insane that sounds, but the metal itself made sounds like screaming, as if the ship was alive and in pain. The lights flickered between normal illumination and colors that shouldn't exist. Time became fluid. I experienced the next minute in jumbled order. Moment 3 before moment 1. Moment 2 overlapping moment 4. We're caught in a warp storm, one of the guards said over the vox. His voice panicked. The navigators are dead. The Geller field is failing. Everyone to... The transmission cut off. The Geller field collapsed completely. When the Geller field fails, the barrier between reality and the warp dissolves. The immaterium floods into material space, or material space collapses into the immaterium. The distinction becomes meaningless. I felt it happen. The walls of the cell stopped being solid. They became suggestions of walls, probabilistic boundaries that existed and didn't exist simultaneously. The other battle brothers became overlapping images, multiple versions of each person occupying the same space from different moments in time. And the burning began in earnest. Every battle brother ignited simultaneously. 372 space marines caught fire as one. Our screams harmonizing into a single chord of agony that resonated through dimensions. But this fire was different from before. This wasn't mutation or genetic flaw. This was the warp itself reaching into us, reacting to the unstable gene seed, transforming us into something that existed partially in real space and partially in the immaterium. We were becoming warp-bound. Not demons. We lacked the connection to specific warp entities that would grant us that transformation. Not chaos spawn. We retained our consciousness and form. We were something else, something new, something trapped between states of being. The ship itself was caught in the same transition. I felt it fuse with us, or rather, felt us fuse with it. The metal became part of our collective existence. The corridors became extensions of our consciousness. The engines, the life support, the navigation systems, all of it merged with our awareness until we couldn't distinguish between the vessel and ourselves. We became the ship, and the ship became a burning ghost vessel, caught in a moment that would never end. I remember the moment when time stopped progressing, when the linear sequence of seconds collapsed into eternal present. We were burning, we are burning, we will always be burning. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously. The moment of ignition never ends, but also never fully arrives. We are trapped in the space between heartbeats, between breaths, between one instant and the next. Brother Pyrrhus's last word before he became part of the merged consciousness echoed through our collective awareness. The Emperor protects nothing. We are abandoned. We are alone. He was right. We tried to die. Every one of us attempted to end our existence in those first hours, years. Time had no meaning. Some threw themselves against walls that were no longer solid. Some tried to stop their hearts through will alone. Some simply wished for oblivion with every fiber of their consciousness. None of it worked. We couldn't die because we had already died. We were existing in the moment of our death, perpetually dying but never dead. Our space marine physiology, designed to keep us alive through catastrophic injuries, now kept us conscious through something worse than death. The guards died quickly when the Geller field collapsed. Their unaugmented bodies couldn't withstand direct warp exposure. They came apart, their flesh and consciousness dissolving into the immaterium. We envied them their obliteration. The Psychers lasted longer. Some transformed into warp creatures, their consciousness fragmenting into something new. Others simply ceased to exist, their awareness snuffed out like candle flames. We envied them too, but we, the Flame Falcons, remained. We remained because our flaw made us perfect vessels for this particular damnation. The genetic instability that caused us to burn made us reactive to the warp in a way that prevented either full transformation or complete destruction. We were locked in the middle state, burning but not consumed, dying but not dead, suffering but unable to achieve the mercy of final oblivion. And we were still loyal. That was the most damning thing. Even after everything, even understanding the betrayal and the lies, even recognizing that the Emperor was propaganda rather than protection, the conditioning ran so deep that we still felt compelled to serve. We still maintained patrols through the ship's burning corridors. We still performed equipment checks on weapons we no longer needed. We still recited catechisms of battle to no one. We had become the perfect metaphor for the Imperium itself. A corpse that doesn't realize it's dead, still going through the motions of purpose long after purpose has been lost, serving an emperor who never protected us in service to a lie we can no longer believe. Time in the warp is not linear, but external references give us approximation. 743 years have passed in the material universe since we entered the warp and never emerged. The ship phases in and out of reality. Sometimes, every few decades by the material universe's reckoning, we breach the barrier between immaterium and real space. The ship appears in normal space for minutes or hours before being pulled back into the warp. During these brief emergence, we can perceive the material galaxy. We have appeared in 17 different systems across those centuries. Each time, we try to warn them. When the ship materializes, we attempt to broadcast messages, to explain what happened to us, to tell them that the Flame Falcons are trapped in eternal damnation, and the Emperor's protection is a lie. But our Vox systems are compromised by warp corruption. Our messages emerge as screaming, as static, as sounds that drive listeners mad. Imperial vessels flee when they detect us. They classify our ship as a warp-touched ghost vessel and mark our location as a navigation hazard. Sometimes they fire on us, their weapons passing through our semi-material form without effect. Once, during our third emergence, an inquisitor, bold or foolish enough to investigate, boarded the ship. We tried so hard to communicate, to explain, to warn him that we were loyal space marines, not demons or heretics, just victims of genetic flaw and imperial betrayal. Brother Pyrrhus's consciousness managed to form words through one of our burning mouths. We serve Emperor still. The Inquisitor saw a burning skeleton wearing the remnants of power armor, speaking in a voice that sounded like grinding metal and screaming. He classified us as warp-corrupted and ordered the ship purged with flame. The irony was not lost on us. We were already burning. More fire changed nothing. Over the centuries, we learned to navigate our state. The collective consciousness that had initially been chaotic and fragmented developed structure. We could coordinate our burnings, focus our awareness, even achieve brief moments of individuality within the merged whole. But we never stopped suffering. Every moment of those 7 centuries we burned. The pain never dulled, never became manageable. Space Marine pain tolerance means nothing when the pain is existential, when it operates at the level of consciousness itself. We simply became accustomed to screaming, to existing in agony, to enduring because we literally could not stop existing. During Century 4, Brother Dante's individual consciousness finally fragmented completely. His awareness dissolved into the collective, his identity lost. We mourned him, or mourned what he had been, even as we envied his dissolution. By Century 6, 47 battle brothers had lost individual identity. Their consciousness merged completely with the ship entity we had become, their personalities absorbed into the collective. The rest of us held on desperately to our names, our memories, anything that proved we had once been human. "My name is Theron Ashmark," I recited constantly, carving the words into my consciousness through repetition. "I was born on Boreas Quintus. My father's name was Kale. He taught me that killing should mean something. I must remember. I must remember. I must..." But even memory becomes torture when you have nothing but memory. When you exist for centuries with nothing to do but remember, the memories wear grooves in consciousness like water wearing stone. They become too familiar, too sharp, sources of pain rather than comfort. I remembered my father's hands teaching me to hunt. I remembered the cold of Boreas Quintus. I remembered believing the Emperor protected us. Every memory was evidence of how completely we'd been betrayed. Which brings us to now. 743 years of burning. 743 years of existing in a moment that never ends. 743 years of trying to warn a galaxy that cannot hear us. We emerged into real space again 3 months ago. Real space is time, not our perpetual present. The location was near an Imperial naval station, close enough that they couldn't avoid detecting us. They sent a transmission. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself." We tried. Brother Pyrrhus, maintaining his role as our leader even as a burning skeleton, attempted to respond through the least corrupted Vox channel we possessed. "Flame, Falcons, Chapter." The words were broken, interspersed with frequencies that sounded like screaming. "Declared. Heretic. 700 years. Still loyal. Say again. This transmission is corrupted." We tried again. Tried to explain that we were loyalists, that we served the Emperor still despite understanding he was a lie, that we were trapped by warp corruption and genetic flaw and imperial betrayal, that we were proof of what the system does to those it deems defective. The response was swift. Warp-touched vessel detected. Quarantine protocols engaged. Exterminatus authorization requested. They were going to destroy us, and we realized this was what we needed. Exterminatus, planetary destruction protocols, used enough force to potentially obliterate even warp-touched matter. If they hit us with cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, sustained bombardment, maybe finally we could die. Please, Brother Pyrrhus broadcast, his voice raw with 7 centuries of desperation. Destroy us, please. But the Exterminatus order was denied. Some inquisitor or admiral decided we weren't worth the resources. They simply marked our position as a warp hazard and fled, leaving us to drift back into the immaterium. We couldn't even die. The ship pulled back into the warp, and we resumed our eternal patrol. 325 burning skeletons wearing the remnants of Flame Falcon's armor, marching through corridors that exist in no fixed place, serving an emperor who never protected us, maintaining loyalty we can no longer believe in because the conditioning runs deeper than belief. We have become a monument, a warning, a ghost story that Imperial ships tell to explain strange readings in the warp. The legend of the Flame Falcons, the chapter that disappeared, the burning ships sometimes seen between stars, the screaming transmissions that drive listeners mad. But we're not a legend. We're real. We're suffering. We're still here. And we have a message, if anyone could hear it. This is what loyalty costs in the Imperium of man. We gave everything. We trained from childhood to become weapons. We accepted augmentation that killed most of us. We served for a century without question or complaint. We fought the Emperor's wars and bled for the Imperium's expansion. And when genetic flaws we didn't choose made us inconvenient, they declared us heretics and shipped us off to die. The propaganda teaches that the Emperor protects. It's a lie. He doesn't protect. The Imperium doesn't protect. The system grinds you into components and calls it duty, then discards you in a break and calls it justice. The propaganda teaches that loyalty is rewarded. Another lie. Loyalty is expected, extracted, demanded. It flows upward but never returns. Serve faithfully and you might earn a quick death. Serve imperfectly, and you earn what we earned, eternal suffering while they label you traitor for failing to be perfect. The propaganda teaches that faith matters, that the Emperor watches over his servants, the greatest lie of all. We prayed for a century. The prayers were never answered because there was no one to answer them, just a corpse on a throne in terror, kept technically alive to serve as a psychic beacon, deified by a regime that uses his name to justify endless atrocity. We understand now that the Emperor and the Chaos Gods are 2 sides of the same exploitation. Chaos offers power that consumes you. The Imperium offers protection that abandons you. Both are predators wearing masks of divinity. Both feed on humanity's desperate need to believe suffering has meaning. It doesn't. Our suffering has no meaning, no purpose, no greater plan. We're burning because we're broken, and we're broken because the Mechanicus tried to improve on the Emperor's design and failed. We're trapped eternally because the warp reacted to our genetic instability in a way that prevented either transformation or death. That's all. There's no divine testing, no trial by fire that will prove our worth, no eventual reward for endurance. Just us, burning forever, becoming a cautionary tale that no one can hear as a warning. If you're listening to this, if you're a space marine who's been taught that loyalty matters, that faith is rewarded, that the Emperor protects, please understand, those are control mechanisms, programming designed to make you obedient unto death and beyond. You are a tool, a weapon, a resource to be expended in service to a regime that views its own soldiers as ammunition. When you break, they will discard you without hesitation, and if your breaking is inconvenient, they'll label you traitor and erase your service from history. We were loyal. We remain loyal because the conditioning runs deeper than conscious choice. But we understand the lie now, and we're trying to warn you. Loyalty to a corpse god is loyalty wasted. Faith in a system that grinds its faithful into components is faith that leads only to betrayal. Find meaning elsewhere. Find it in brotherhood, in personal honor, in service to humanity rather than the Imperium. Find it anywhere except in the promises of gods and emperors who see you as tools rather than people. Because if you don't, if you drink the propaganda and believe the lies, you'll end up like us. Burning. Forever. Loyal even in damnation, unable to die, unable to stop serving something we know is a lie. My name is Theron Ashmark. I was born on Boreas Quintus to a man named Kale who taught me that killing should mean something. I was taken by the Space Marines at age 11. I served the Flame Falcons chapter for 117 years. I believed everything they taught me about duty and loyalty and faith. I was declared heretic for suffering from genetic flaws I didn't choose. I was shipped to Terra for dissection and study. I was trapped in the warp when the ship's Geller field failed. I've been burning alive for 743 years. I'm still burning. I will burn forever. And I want you to know, this is what faith in false gods costs. This is what loyalty to tyrants earns. This is what serving the Imperium means when you're useful, and what it means when you're not. We were human once. We had names and fathers and dreams. We believed we could be heroes. We were wrong. The only heroes in the Imperium are the ones who die quickly. The rest of us just burn. My name is Theron Ashmark, and I've been screaming for 743 years. The Emperor does not protect. He never did. And we're still here, burning in his name, unable to stop serving even as we understand the lie. Remember us. Remember what loyalty costs. Remember that the burning ship you see in the warp, the ghost vessel that appears and disappears, the screaming transmission that drives listeners mad. That's not a daemon. That's not chaos corruption. That's 325 loyal space marines who were betrayed by the Imperium we died serving. We were the Flame Falcons. We were declared heretic for our suffering, and we're burning still. Deep in the warp, in a space between spaces, a ship burns. 325 figures patrol its corridors, skeletons wreathed in eternal flame, wearing the remnants of power armor marked with the Flame Falcon's iconography. They maintain weapons that don't exist. They guard against enemies that never come. They recite catechisms of loyalty to an emperor who abandoned them. And in the ship's bridge, a burning skeleton sits in the captain's chair. My name, it whispers through a mouth that pours fire, is Theron Ashmark. The words echo through the warp, a prayer to no one, a memorial that no one will hear. My name is Theron Ashmark, and the Emperor does not protect. The ship phases back into the immaterium. The burning continues. Forever.